platforms reward creators who post short, frequent content. But that's the opposite of how independent filmmaking works. How are we supposed to play the algorithm game when we're releasing one film every 2 years? Well, that's easy. Just release one film every 3 months.
This is Truly Independent, a show that demystifies the indie film journey by documenting the process of releasing independent films in theaters. Each week, Garrett, Batty, and I, Darren Smith, will update you on our journey, bringing guests to share their insights into the process and answer your questions. Garrett, my friend, how the heck are you?
Hey, Darren. Good. I'm doing really well. It's nice to see you. How are you?
Nice to see you as well. I'm great. I've been working out the last month and a half, and I feel wonderful. So back to the gym. It's been really nice. I saw you there one day. You were playing pickleball.
Yeah, I'm down there a lot doing some pickleball, and that's it's a good thing to do in the mornings.
It
So
is a good thing to do in the mornings. Well, today I'm excited because we have like a mailbag episode. We've got some listener questions that have been piling up, and rather than tack them on at the end of an episode, it felt like, well, why don't we do them all together so we can get a couple of topics that typically or maybe don't go together. Let's put them together today. And so I'm excited. We got 3 questions and we're going to dive into these. What do you think?
I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled that people are taking the time to listen and to ask questions and send comments. So thank you to those who are doing that, and keep it up because they are fun to address, and hopefully we can address them all.
Yeah. Well, I think the theme here is like, how do you do this? And so I love that we have become kind of a podcast where people are trusting us with these kind of questions. And so I'm excited to dive in. Why don't we look at the first one? Our first topic is around AI. So the question is, I've heard a lot about AI tools streamlining production, but where do you draw the line between useful automation and losing creative control? How do truly independent filmmakers stay in charge? Nice nod there. How do truly independent filmmakers stay in charge? Do you want to kick this off?
Sure. Yeah, it's a good question. And having not been in production with AI, I don't know that I'm the best person to answer this from my own experience. I've got theories. I can tell you right now, in development and pre-production, AI has been an incredible tool. And I think in any case, whether you're using an intern or an expert, the role of creative control. If the question is how do we use any sort of help without losing creative control, I think that you get to decide that. So you get to limit the input or accept the input from others to make sure that it's matching your creative vision. I think AI is the same.
Yeah. I took some time to really think this one out and figure what's an encapsulation, like what's a one liner people could tattoo on their arms or something like that, right? And so what I came up with is that AI is a tool, not a voice. So we're not inviting AI into the room and saying, please create this final output for me. Please don't write the script, don't film the thing or generate the imagery. Like that's the craft. That's the stuff that we love to do and is why we do this work, because we love making movies. We love making movies. We also love watching movies and producing movies and doing all the things, but the making is the human element that we like. Like don't take that away from us. But if
Yeah.
it can make it more efficient, what if we could do the same amount of work in 8 hours a day instead of 12 hours a day? I think everybody would be for that, right?
Yeah.
And so the same thing of like you look along the history of film, and we went from film to digital, and that sped things up and it saved and cut costs. We went from analog editing to digital editing platforms. Nobody
Yeah.
complained because it
Yeah.
still required a human operator to go in. Now, I think once you get to the point where instead of making, you're prompting, I don't think prompting is the same. I've done a lot of prompting over the last few months to try to figure out how AI works and to really cement or at least kind of give myself an idea of what I think about this stuff. And so really it's about this idea of like the creative sovereignty. We want to own the creativity. If we then can make the arduous stuff or the stuff that takes longer not take as long because of an AI tool, great. tools are good things. That's
Yeah.
what craftsmen use, is tools to do the work. But nobody wants an AI generated chair. That doesn't have the same value as a handmade, crafted with by hand and tools chair. There's just a different thing. Even if they look and feel and measure exactly the same, there's something different about it. And I think we need to keep that in mind when it comes to how we're using AI. So again, AI is a tool, not a voice.
I think it's a smart thing to do, Darren, and that would then you'd have to ask who is the voice, and the voice is that's the creator, that's the director or the producer, whoever is the creative person involved in this. When I've used AI, let's see, I was recently asked to participate in a short film for consideration. There's a studio that wants to create a bunch of short film ideas, uh, fund some short films, and so I went to AI and said, hey, I've got this budget and I need to shoot a film in a day or two, and give me and here are some ideas or elements that I'm playing with. Give me 5 brainstorm ideas on just kind of log lines on films, and I found a couple that were interesting to me. Like, okay, yeah, that's kind of in line with what I'm trying to create. And so, okay, let's explore this story. And we used AI to do this. Now, my theory is that if you put 10 directors in a room and said, make a short film with these parameters, you, I don't know if you hear my Siri going off, but
AI is working in the background as we speak.
yeah, yeah,
Are you
it's
even
going
real,
on.
Garrett? Are you an
I know.
AI version of Garrett?
If you put 10 directors in the room and gave them the task to make a short film and said, hey, make AI part of your process, you are still going to get 10 different films because the creative process isn't overtaken because you're using a tool. I guess that's exactly what you're saying. I'm just reiterating that. So even if we're saying, hey, AI, write the script, you can get 10 different scripts and you can get things that resonate with the director. Like, where is my voice in that? Okay, well, I want to change this or use this character or even fix this loophole or plot point. And so that is the creative. And I think that that's just like a Hollywood studio using a reader to sort through potential projects. Very, very similar process.
Yeah. Well, I just read a post on LinkedIn the other day where someone in a studio position was basically saying it's already here. Like AI is writing scripts, AI is reading scripts, AI is giving feedback on scripts, and then studio execs are using AI to make decisions on the scripts for viability and for market valuation and all that kind of stuff. Like it's already
Yeah,
here.
yeah, yeah,
But ultimately, right, the decision is not being made by AI. They might be informing the decision, they might be giving you clarity faster, but I don't know. For me, the idea of an AI generated script is it can only be iterative, right? It's not creation because they don't create. They search the LLM, all the history and all of the data that they have, and then they're quickly putting together exactly what you want. And if you don't like it, it regenerates a different thing that might be what you want. But it's compiling from the existence of what's out there. Yes, it could be argued that we do the same because we are being informed by the movies we like and the movies we watch and the scripts we read and the things that resonate with us. But ultimately then we take our lived experience and we apply all of that taste to the current project. There's this quote that I love from Derek Sivers, who's a guy that I read all his books and love the way he thinks about the world. And I think we can interject something about AI in this because I think he said it before AI was a huge, like top of mind thing in our culture. Derek Sivers says mastery is the best goal because the rich can't buy it, the impatient can't rush it, the privileged can't inherit it, and nobody can steal it. You can only earn it. Mastery is the ultimate status. So, as a someone who has craftsman branding all over, like that's my business, that's my license plate, like craftsman is the thing that tries to keep me in line with like the vision and the goal that I have, and a master craftsman like is a thing, and an AI can't become one because they're not actually doing the work. They're not getting the lived experience of mastery. And so I think we're always going to be able to sniff out an AI generated script because it's not going to be human and it wasn't earned. It was something that was just taken and compiled and structured based on everything else that already exists. So I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at on it. I'm sure there are people, I know there are people out there making AI generated scripts and AI generated movies. And so far I haven't been convinced that any of them are good from what I've seen and read, but it'll get better. I always tell people that today is the worst it'll ever be. It'll only keep getting better.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
take that for what you want.
Yeah. I don't feel threatened yet by AI. I'm it's a tool for me, and it's been very, very helpful.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. I think
Great,
we
great question.
put a good button on that one. Yes. All right.
Yeah.
You want to hit us with question number 2?
Question number 2 that came in, also A. So we got the 3A questions here. So
Yeah.
algorithms. Most platforms reward creators who post short, frequent content, but that's the opposite of how independent filmmaking works. How are we supposed to play the algorithm game when we're releasing one film every 2 years? Well, that's easy. Just release one film every 3 months
Or every week, like the
or every week.
algorithm
That's
asks
the
you for.
algorithm.
You need
No,
free.
what a great question. What a frustrating, furious battle we're in as independent filmmakers because we essentially start a business, operate it for 18 months to 2 years, and then end the business. And the tail of the business, has about a 7 year shelf life on that film. But the audience hype and interest and, uh, the peak for that is, yeah, it's 6 months to 2 years. And, yeah, I mean, how long can you milk that? Plus, how long can it sustain you? So, great question on the algorithm thing. And again, you're asking somebody that doesn't have a ton of experience in that. Darren, I'm sure you have a lot more experience in that than I do.
Well, I mean, we're kind of living the answer, I think. We've faced this same sort of tension last year when we said we're going to release these movies. We need an audience to show up. How are we going to do that? How are we going to engage people? How are we going to let them know this movie is coming without a massive budget? And I saw this question come in, and I'd heard variations of this where people are lamenting like YouTube and Instagram, they reward daily or weekly uploads. Like, what are we supposed to do? Our movies are long form and they come out every 2 years. It's like, oh man. Well, a lot of filmmakers do it solve it by doing nothing. They just go, well, I'm not going to do daily videos because that I'm a filmmaker, or I'm not
Yeah,
going to do weekly uploads because I'm a filmmaker. It's like, well, there probably is a way for you to come up with something that's valuable to your audience that also generates awareness and creates tension for them wanting to see the thing you're making. And I love the way that people have shared this idea, which is like sell the sawdust. So this is going back to the craftsman analogy, right? But like if you're making a table, there's a whole bunch of scraps, there's a whole bunch of sawdust, there's a process that's going on. And that is something that's really interesting to the people that will show up and watch your movie. So if you had behind the scenes updates every week, if you had images from set or a blog post once a week or whatever it is, maybe you don't have time to do a video or hire a team to do behind the scenes for you every week, but you can use the resources you have. And I mean, when we were on set at the Carpenter, we were filming videos, like once a
yeah,
day or once a week. You just pop it up and go, hey, let's do an update. It's like, great, let's do that. And those things generated awareness for a movie that wasn't going to come out for 2 years. But I
yeah,
know that there were people that were anxious that entire time. It may have just been my dad. I'm sure there's more than one person, but still, like I know that there were people who saw your posts, saw saw the behind the scenes and going, "Wow, that looks like an incredible set. Wow, those look like amazing costumes. Wow, look at the location that they're at." And go, "I can't wait to see this movie." So, I
yeah,
would say like build kind of a content flywheel around the film. As soon as you have the idea, I would start talking about it in the sense of, I think this is my next project and I'm going to bring you along on the journey. And guess what? You don't need a million people. if you're doing a short film. You don't need $10 million in box office if you spent 100,000 to make the movie. Like, you can use the resources that you have and generate awareness and build that audience, and use the algorithm the way that it's intended to be used, which is to feed it, right? It needs to be fed every day, every week. You can come up with ideas that will serve both sides. One is helping you feed the algorithm, reach more people, build your audience. The other is, getting the reward of the algorithm because you're feeding it every day. So that's how I would approach it.
I think one of the best examples of that or I guess there are numerous examples of that, but one that stands out to me is the Chosen
Mm.
series. And I know we talk a lot about faith-based content on this podcast just by the nature of the type of movies that I make. But you can watch Dallas Jenkins, the creator of the Chosen, doing live feeds from set, and even right now they're in pre-production and early production on season 5 or season 6, excuse me. And you're starting to see these behind the scenes posts, just like you're talking about, with what we do with the Carpenter. But that, for a series that perhaps has full year gaps between releasing a season, um, there's a constant stream of media generated from whatever stage they're in. Um, and that's a great, I think, evidence of that working to feed that algorithm. Um,
Yeah.
I the only pushback is there's the risk of, again, creating the buzz, creating the hype, and um, then like the project bailing. You start to be the boy that cried wolf, right? And say, hey,
Mm.
here's my next film, and it's this one. And then you don't have investment or whatever it is, or another project or work for hire gig comes along, and you don't do that, and suddenly your audience is kind of getting whiplash, and you start to risk. I don't know. I think you risk reputation to always be the hype man and never deliver. And
Yeah.
so you got to make sure that it still has some sort of calendar of progress, or like, yeah, maybe you don't say here's my next film until you reach a certain threshold of funding, or of actually being your next film.
Yeah, definitely like lean towards telling the truth online because if one of your values is overhyping your projects before they're released, then yeah, people are going to sniff that out and go, well, I got fooled once, I don't want to be fooled again. And that's a terrible way to build an audience. So it's much better to change the positioning, and instead of saying this is my next project and it comes out in 2 years, this is what I'm working on today. And tomorrow might be different, and that's okay. But every business, every influencer, every whatever starts at zero, right? And so Dallas Jenkins, I don't know what he was doing before The Chosen, but now he's got almost 500,000 people on Instagram, 2.5 million followers for The Chosen series. They had to add those one by one, just like we all do. And you
Yeah.
can accelerate it by having a good project that people like. You can accelerate it by putting money behind audience acquisition. But in the meantime, like every creator, every filmmaker, I think, should be doing something to benefit from all the upside that an algorithm can give you, because algorithms are amplifiers. So if you have something valuable, the job of the algorithm is to put it in front of the people it thinks that will also find it valuable. And that's a really free, cheap way to build and expand and grow your audience. But you have to be using it. You have to be working with it in order to get that. Like, you can't just put a movie online and expect demand to be created because you put a movie online. It has to come from the time that you spent with the algorithm, feeding it over and over and over again, so it knows who you are and it knows who to put your stuff in front of, so that it can do that consistently. I mean, if we just zoom out for 2 seconds and realize, like, what is the purpose of an algorithm? It's to keep people on that platform for as long as possible. That is its purpose. And so if you can feed it stuff that gets people to engage and stick around for longer, they can sell more ads, they can make more money. Hopefully they share some of it with you, but then they're going to keep doing that for you because you are keeping people on the platform for longer. So it actually benefits from long form, if you can do it consistently. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the 30-second reels with the dance videos. You can put out a 3 or 5, or I mean, we put out 40-minute podcasts every week, but the algorithm rewards by putting it in front of new people every day, because we get like 80, 90, 100, sometimes 120% retention, because people are going back and watching stuff. So if you put value out there, the algorithms are going to amplify it.
I'm going to rewind this section and watch it again, Darren. That was good content right there.
Awesome. My goal is to only say good content.
I think I broke the creator rule by calling it content, so sorry
You
about
did,
that.
you did, but I'm not going to be a word Nazi and say stop using content, because
Yeah,
especially when we're talking about short form and social media stuff, that is really content. It's not necessarily the main thing that we as filmmakers are trying to create, but we understand the purpose that it has and where it fits in this flywheel of like, how do we generate awareness that turns into sales, that turns into the next project over and over and over again.
yeah, yeah. Wonderful. Great input.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and I can relate to those that I've got plenty of friends that have just bailed out on the algorithm. I said, look, they're directing movies for Hallmark, or I got a showrunner that's a buddy, and uh, a buddy that's a showrunner for ironically popular YouTube series. Uh, but he's done with Facebook, done with social media. He says, look, I just don't want to be a part of that anymore.
Yeah.
And so that's fine too. I could relate to that and say, what, I don't know, how do you release a movie? And I guess, if Hallmark is releasing your movie, you're not the one that's driving the views anyways.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the luxury of not having to build an audience.
Yeah, definitely. But then, the flip side is what happens when you're no longer directing for Hallmark? Like, where do you have any ownership or direct contact with an audience that can support your work if you don't build it while you're doing that? That isn't to say you have to be on social media. I always propose that people build email lists. To me, that's the most direct, non-algorithm dependent way of connecting with an audience. But I get it too. I've turned off essentially all social media except for LinkedIn, and even then, LinkedIn isn't fun to scroll. So it's a
Yeah,
really great, like, I can go on and I can share something every day that's hopefully valuable to an audience. I've had times where, my average post will get 1,000 or 2,000 impressions. I've had some that have done 100,000 because they took off and a lot of people reposted them and a lot of people engaged and commented and all those things. So my time on this platform is to go in and engage with the audience that's engaging with the content. I don't really
yeah,
care about the people who haven't seen the content or don't care about the content. I'm there to build relationships with people. But guess what? You start real relationships with people, and all of a sudden they want to have more interest in what you're doing. They come to your website, they follow along, they join your email list, they join your communities, whatever it is. And those are the things you can build while you're doing the main thing, which for me is raising a fund, for you is getting the next project going. But if you can do it in 15 or 30 minutes a day, why wouldn't you? That's kind of my stance right now. Is ignoring it is perilous. So you got to do something to build an audience, because I think in the future that's really all we're going to have. Like, if you think content is crazy now, how much noise there is, and the millions of minutes that are uploaded you know every second to YouTube, it's only going to get worse when you can have AI generate your weekly content for you, because it's trained on your face and your voice and your topics, and you just say, put out 40 reels this week, and it generates it in 30 seconds. It's just going to get noisier. So the only thing we have, and this maybe takes us really nicely to our third and final question, but it really points to the fact that you're going to need an audience. So why don't we hit the third question right there? Audience building.
audience building, the third A.
Yeah, the third A. So we have AI, algorithms, and audience building. I'm making work I believe in, but it's barely getting seen. How do you build an audience when you don't have a big marketing budget or a recognizable name? Not to just like sit with the weight of that, but honestly, I feel that so strongly, because that's the thing I probably see the most in our audience that reach out to us and engage with us online, is just this. the weight of it. Like, this isn't what I signed up for. I just want to make movies. I just want to shoot things. I just want to direct things. I just want to act. Why do I have to do this as well?
Great question. Yeah, and I think that's a question we all want to solve. Um, Now, okay, so we might lose listeners on this answer. We might lose our listener on this answer. Uh, but I I would look at the first part of that question to answer the second part.
Ooh,
I'm making work I believe in, but it's barely getting seen. How do you build an audience when you don't have a big marketing budget or recognizable name? My question for the filmmaker, and that's the conundrum of an artist. You believe in it, but who else does? I'm making work that I believe in. Great. You are your audience. So that's who you're making it for. If nobody's watching your work, you've got to figure out how to find that balance of how do I make work that other people believe in? Or how do I get people to believe in my work? Darren, you've said it a million times on this podcast. You have to, well, and I still can't even quote it right, but it's like create something that's overvalued or undersold or sell it to somebody who values what you're doing, right? If you're making, I had somebody reach out and they had let's just say it's a film festival type movie targeted at Christian audiences, and it was about a photographer that wanted to take pictures of human form, and he couldn't figure out why. I think he knew why the audience wasn't responding, why the Christian audience wasn't responding to this idea, but he wanted, it's like, I just had to make it. Like, okay, that's fine. You had to make it, but you got to know your audience.
yeah,
And at some point, as an artist, you got to figure out how to balance it. Am I just gonna make this for myself? Great, do it. Or do I want an audience? Okay, great. What are they watching?
yeah. I have a lot of thoughts on this question.
Okay, all right.
Okay,
Hopefully they hopefully they kind of align with what I've said.
I
Otherwise, we're
think
just gonna
so.
edit
I think
my
so. You
answer out.
definitely need to know your audience. So, step one or part one of my answer is um, you need to understand the audience you're actually trying to build. So, I've had 3 people this last week ask about validating a project before you make it. And I was like, man, it's really hard because one of them specifically was like, I've put it in front of hundreds of my audience members and they all want it. I said, great, but they're not your audience right now. Your first audience is the investors, right? And if you can't get investors to pay for it or the audience to come up with enough money to self fund it or to fund it from the audience side, you still don't have a project. You don't have something you can sell. So part of it is really understanding who your audience is. And for a lot of us, the first audience and maybe even the only audience we need is investors. So do you need 1 million people on Instagram to follow you in order to get 1 or 5 or 10 investors to invest in your project? No. Like I think that maybe even distracts you from the actual work of what you need to be focusing on. And so if you shift that focus from I need 1 million people to follow me in order to be successful to I need 10 investors, that's a very different process way forward, right? You can go get 10 people this week because you could just talk to 100 of them that have historically invested in film and say, I have a film like the one you invested in. Are you looking to do more? My guess is if you messaged 100 people and you were human and not just treating them like a bank, you could connect with 100 people, talk to 10 or 20 or 30 of them and get 5 to 10 to invest. Like that's just the way that I kind of see the process of fundraising. So part one is like, you don't need millions. You need 10 or 100 or 1,000 or whatever it may be. If you're going to do the crowdfunding route, you need $100 from 1,000 people. Okay, so go do that. And then you have 100,000 to make your movie or whatever it is. So part one, figure out who your audience actually is and go to them first and build that audience. Right now, to give you like the example of how I'm implementing that feedback is I'm building an email list of 2,500 investors. I'm at about 300. And that's 300 people I've met, have had conversations with and said, if you want to follow along with what we're doing, I'll put you on the email list. You get an email update every week with what we're doing. And, out of those 300 or so, I've got half a dozen that have invested in the fund. So you just keep going until you have enough. You just the work continues. I'd love to have 2,500 at some point in the next few years that are, because if you can put, $1,000 average investment across 2,500 people, you can go make movies for the rest of your life. Like that's it, right? So that's part one. The part two, though, is a lot of people think that the content they have to put out is about the project, meaning selling the project, not just giving updates on it, like we were talking about during the algorithm answer, but that the only thing they put out in the world is, I need this. This is what I need right now. I need investors. I need connections. I'm looking for this. I'm looking for this. I need a distributor. And it's all like, I need this. And that's just not great positioning when you're putting content out on the internet. And so what I consult with people on is, what's the story behind this? What's the tension you can create by telling a story about a bigger picture than just your project, right? So you and I encapsulate this by talking about being truly independent. And the people that also want to be truly independent are feeling the tension of like, ooh, I want to listen to that episode. Ooh, that sounds like a podcast I want to engage with, because I want that outcome as well. So we're talking about this big idea rather than our specific projects, even though the first season was talking about our specific projects. It was all under this big umbrella of, we're sharing how we're trying to become truly independent. And that was kind of the framing for that first season. So if you can make it easy for people to follow your story, I think audience growth becomes easier, because now, instead of trying to convince people to follow along, instead you're creating tension that pulls them towards you. And in my experience over 15 years of doing this online stuff, that's a lot easier when you've got something people want and so they come and get it. Then audience growth is fun instead of arduous work every day. So I'll pause there because I've already said a lot of words, but how does that resonate with you? Because I don't think you and I have had this conversation before.
Oh, it's fine, and I gotta confess that during your answer, my mind I tried to put myself in the place of a listener to truly independent, and say, look, what does this have to do with filmmaking? Like, I want to know independent filmmaking, and I'm sure we can tie this all in, but a lot of this isn't like the creative. I want to wake up and get creative and be on set and make a movie. So why are we covering this on Truly Independent, demystifying the independent filmmaking process?
Because if you don't do it yourself, then you are dependent on someone else doing it for you. So going back to your Hallmark director friend, if they don't build an audience, then they are completely reliant on Hallmark calling them to produce or direct the next movie, and completely reliant on their audience showing up and liking that movie. And they have zero interaction, zero control, zero leverage to be able to affect that in any way. And so the opposite, if you choose not to do it, if you don't build an audience, then you are dependent on someone else's audience, because that's ubiquitous. If you make something, a film, a TV show, a made for TV movie, a short film, whatever it is, it cannot be profitable if there's no audience for it. Even if that audience is one patron, like the guy who bought the Wu-Tang Clan album for $2 million, like that's an audience of one, but they still required an audience for that thing to sell and make money. So you have to have an audience, whether it's yours or someone else's. And so if you are not truly independent by creating your own audience, then you're dependent on a distributor, a studio, a station, a network, a streamer, and their audience to show up. But we constantly have examples of filmmakers who are going, oh, if I can just get my movie on Netflix, then I'll be profitable. And then they make $75,000. And you're like, but it had 13 million watch hours. 13 million people watched that thing. Where's the money? Well, that's the trade-off. Is you said, well, yeah, Netflix has 250, 300, whatever million subscribers all over the world. And we had 13 million people show up. Well, if you had 13 million people in theaters, that'd be $130 million. But on Netflix, it represents $75,000. So that's the trade-off. If you don't build your own audience, then you're reliant on someone else's, and they have all the leverage, which means they get to pay you cents on the dollar for every stream or every hour watched or whatever it is. They get to make up the terms for how you get paid for the thing that you made. All of that is not interesting to us because we're pursuing this idea of being truly independent.
Well, you tapped into what I've been researching a lot on this week is those kind of streaming rates and AVOD and TVOD and SVOD, and I know that wasn't your that wasn't what the question was, but that's where my mind went.
Well, and that's a good teaser
Which,
for next episode because I do think we're going to dive into that. It's a very essential thing for, again, truly independent means you understand the numbers, you understand distribution, you understand windows, you understand why you would go one place and not another place because of how it trickles down to you and your investors. And so maybe that's where we leave it today is, a little tee up for the next episode. But is there anything else you wanted to say about these 3 A's, AI, algorithms, and audience building before we wrap up today? Oh, I did the thing. You're not supposed to say wrap up or in conclusion or nearing the end of this podcast.
no, I think we've covered it. Again, thank you for the questions. We just love, again, interacting with our listeners and hearing from you and hearing your experiences. And we try to have you on the show when we can. And so thanks for continuing to support this podcast.
Awesome. Now, if you want to help us build our audience, share this episode with a friend. That's how it works, folks. One person at a time. So go ahead and share it. Leave us a nice review on Apple Podcasts or on YouTube. Garrett, I like that one. We should do these more often. I like the mailbags.
Mailbags. Okay, let's do it. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Truly Independent. To join us on the journey, be notified and ask us questions about today's episode, head over to 3coinpro.com/podcast and put in your name and an email address. If you're a fan of the show, please leave us a review on your favorite podcast app and be sure to share this. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week. Our intro and outro music is Election Time by Kjartan Abel.